bringing its conversation a bit closer to home. You know the story, Eskom, the state power utility, and the conversation around black-owned businesses. Well, there's been an update on the story. 26 black-owned companies have been referred to National Treasury for possible blacklisting, and that has sparked serious reaction from the security industry. The question being raised not whether companies should be held accountable if there has been any wrongdoing. Of course, they should. But the question is, was the process fair? Were the companies given a proper opportunity to respond? And what happens to the people whose lives depend on them? The Association of Black Security and Allied Businesses say some of the companies feel like they've been targeted, and it's raising concerns about whether there was due process. There are also allegations that some of the businesses have previously raised concerns upon wrongdoing at Eskom, and those allegations themselves need to be tested. So I'm going to be trying to get more insight on this matter. So where does it stand? Where are we currently? And I will be speaking to Sindiswa, spokesperson from TAPOSA, and they're going to be giving us more insight on the story and what's all about. Sindiswa, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Slayla, for inviting us. In fact, the association, it's called the Association of Private Security Owners of South Africa.
Yes, TAPOSA. Yes.
TAPOSA,
No,
yes.
Thank you so much for making that clear. I want to start with the basics. Just give us a bit more background on the story. 26 black-owned security companies being targeted by Eskom. Why really? What's the background here?
So I have a problem with Eskom setting up a committee, a supplier disciplinary committee or review committee that would look into companies that have had certain transgressions from committing fraud and from being corrupt and stuff, and being brought to book or being able to be made accountable with regards to that. You should understand that the utility itself has been riddled with companies and collusion internally, in terms of the officials that are within Eskom, and also in terms of the suppliers of Eskom, in terms of being able to embark on corrupt activities. Has been made public. But what we are saying is that within those companies that have been identified, so now we are going into these 26 companies that we actually alluded to when you introduced the topic. What we're saying is that when they were going through that particular review, because of certain things that actually happened in the past, you would remember that in the private security industry space, there's a number of security companies that are rendering services to Eskom. And in that regard, there's also companies as well that raised an alarm with some shenanigans that actually transpired some years ago in Eskom that are actually involved the former security manager of Eskom, Karen Pillay, that was subsequently suspended and over some years has been fired. And within that there was a cabal even during that time. But as an association, because we're representing those companies, we actually came out and actually exposed that there was this shenanigans taking place where 500 million was actually on an emergency contract. It was a contract that was actually issued by Eskom, in which at that time that 500 million was actually spent in 3 months, and there was no procurement processes that were followed, and there was a flawed process that was followed. So we exposed that. And some of those companies that we're actually talking about that are in that 26 list that has been referred to the National Treasury are those companies that belong to the association. And some of those people that belong to those companies are people that are holding positions within that particular organization that exposed this. So we feel as if like this is just like an agenda or a vendetta, where these companies have now been clapped with those that have conducted fraud and fraudulent activities, and they have been referred to the Treasury Department for the Treasury to actually blacklist these companies from doing business with the state for 7 years. And now if you look at the particular situation as well, if you look at the merits in which these companies have been clubbed together as being fraud, and their directors as well as have committed that fraud and whatever it is that they're talking about in terms of corruption, one of those companies or two of those companies, there was nothing about fraud and corruption. In fact, we've got a report that was submitted by Eskom or was given to that company by Eskom when they requested the copy of the allegations. It has got nothing to do with fraud. It has got everything to do with the contract that they had some years ago, in which there was an issue from an operational level, and it had got to do with exactly that. Now, where does this whole issue of fraud and corruption coming from? So we feel like this process that has been undertaken by Eskom, it was actually it's an agenda against the very same companies that are whistleblowers, that are actually coming up and talking about issues of corruption, and that cabal within Eskom has got a vested interest in ensuring that those companies actually do not do business. And in been coming back in terms of whatever it is that they have done before, they decided that they are going to be going to embark on this particular process in which they're going to be subjecting those companies in terms of those punitive measures. But the National Treasury, I think that is the most disappointing aspect, that when they referred the whole thing to the National Treasury, clapping those companies, the National Treasury did not even give these companies a right of reply. They just willy-nilly blacklisted from those companies from doing business with the state for 7 years. Can you just imagine how many security officers are going to be affected? Because if you are going to be if you're going to bar those companies from doing business with the state, that means that these companies are not going to be paid. And also on the conditions of Eskom, in terms of them indicating that they're going to be referring these companies from some disciplinary measures, whatever it is, they have not been paying them for even 24 months. So you understand that the modus operandi is just to destroy these companies, so that these companies are in a brink of collapse. They become not operational. They cannot be able to pay workers. They are heavily in debt because they've got to borrow money for them to be able to make sure that they keep afloat. It is the most saddest thing that I've never seen, just because people want to be able to settle scores.
In simple terms here, is TAPOSA saying these companies did nothing wrong, or is your concern fundamentally about how the process was handled?
So it's twofold. One is that some of those companies, I'm not saying that the 26 companies were not at fault, because remember, it's not only private security companies that have been referred amongst that list of 26 companies. It's not only private security companies that have been referred to the National Treasury. And we're not saying that the 26 companies, all of them are innocent. No. What we are saying is that Eskom has got every right for them to be able, as I had said, to identify maladministration, corruption activities that is happening, and refer any company that has done wrongdoing to the National Treasury for it to be blacklisted. It's their right. They need to actually do that. Now, the companies that we're actually referring to are companies that did not even do anything with regards to what Eskom has, the allegations that has been leveled against them by Eskom. It has got to do with operational reasons. And operational reasons that I'm actually talking about, it's also about these companies. They even went as far as being able to submit reports, written submission, to indicate that this is an operational issue, this is an SLA issue, this issue was 10 years ago. One had got to do with something with regards to the national key point in terms of certain documentation that was supposed to be submitted, which in terms of the processes that has to happen, it was undertaken by that particular entity. Then the second part, it was about an erroneous charge of a security officer in that NKP site, in which the company was accountable. Tell me how many companies in the private security industry undergo that with stolen firearms as well. In terms of this particular company, and an additional company that was referred to the National Treasury that we're actually referring to, they did nothing wrong. The problem here, it's that part, but the second part as well, it's the process that has been followed. It's the fact that these companies were not even given an opportunity to defend themselves. And when they request through PAJA and go to court, and even, can you just imagine that first you are not being paid for 4 months, and then you take the matter to actually to court because it is your own expense. You need to be able to defend themselves. They're not even given an opportunity for them to be able to defend themselves. So the whole process that has been undertaken by Eskom in terms of referring these companies to be blacklisted is completely, totally flawed. And it is not fair to those particular companies because if you look at all of them, there's none of them that were questioned. Some I'm talking about even the very same company that was fingered to have had their hands in a cookie jar of that 500 million that was given to them willy-nilly without accountability. They're still enjoying contracts with Eskom. They still have evergreen contracts with Eskom. They've still been given millions of business and contracts by Eskom because they've got influence, because they're colluding with people internally, and nobody's taking them to task. Now the SIU has investigated them, and nobody, not amongst the 26 companies that have been referred to the National Treasury. Why are you being unfair in terms of being able to be selective in terms of processes? Why are you only patching certain companies that are speaking out with regards to the issues of corruption and fraud and refer them to be blacklisted with the state? Remember also, even those companies are not only in the security industry, they also do other businesses with other departments. They're also in other sectors as well, in terms of transport and such. And if you are blacklisting them, that means you are blasting them holistically in terms of them being able to even do anything with the state, in any business with the state. How do you do that just because you want to settle scores as officials of government?
Very, very concerning, Sindiswa. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. We're going to leave it there for now, but this is a story we continue to follow quite closely. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There you go. Sindiswa Changuion, spokesperson for TAPOSA, speak to us about the controversy surrounding around 26 black-owned security companies referred by Eskom for possible retraction. And I think that's the distinction, very, very important. Possible restriction, which is not the same as the final finding of guilt. We'll continue to follow this story quite closely because of the implications that it has. Otherwise, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.
We work hard to